Emperor Kale had lived for 3,000 years, longer than human civilization had even had a name for itself. In that time, he had watched stars be born and die, watched empires rise and crumble, watched whole species burn through their brief spans of existence like sparks in a windstorm. And still, the Solari Empire endured. It stretched across 47 star systems, held together by technology, discipline, and the unyielding will of one ruler. The Solari themselves were the Empire's proof of superiority. Tall, luminous beings with golden skin that shone like polished metal beneath light. Their eyes glowed with an amber fire. Their bodies were engineered masterpieces, genes sculpted over millennia to erase frailty and refine every function. They did not get sick. They did not tire the way other species did. And, most importantly, they did not sleep unless they were dying. Sleep was vulnerability. Sleep was weakness. It was the primitive surrender of the mind, the opening of a door to danger. The Solari had evolved beyond such needs, or so they told themselves. Kale had repeated that belief so often it had become as natural as breathing. Tonight, he stood alone in his private observatory, gazing through a crystalline viewport at the distant blue-green sphere humans called Earth. 2 years ago, his fleet had arrived at its edges. 6 months later, the war was over. Humans had fought with a kind of frantic courage that surprised even Solari generals. But courage was not enough. Their ships were slow, their weapons crude, their tactics desperate. They never truly had a chance. Now most humans lived in settlement zones scattered across Solari worlds, confined to work the Empire considered beneath its citizens' cleaning, maintenance, basic labor. Many Solaris spoke of them the way one might speak of clever animals, useful, occasionally troublesome, ultimately inferior. Kale did not waste time on hatred. Hatred required energy. What he did spend time on was understanding. During the invasion, his advisors had warned him about humans, not because they were brilliant strategists, but because they were unpredictable. Their unpredictability didn't come from logic. It came from emotions specifically. Their irrational attachment to their offspring. A human parent would run into fire for their child. They would fight impossible odds, sacrifice everything, die without hesitation. It wasn't strategic. It wasn't efficient. It was pure feeling. And pure feeling made creatures do things no algorithm could anticipate. Kale wanted to study that phenomenon. Not out of compassion. Compassion had been optimized out of Solari culture centuries ago, but because understanding one's subjects made ruling them easier. So when a human maid named Rebecca approached him 3 months earlier with a request, he had listened. She had knelt before his throne in the main audience chamber, head bowed so low her forehead nearly touched the floor. Her voice shook like something held together by threads. Your Majesty, please. The settlement zones are dangerous for children. Not enough food, not enough medicine. She swallowed hard. If my daughter could work here with me, she would be safe. I'll do double shifts. I'll do anything. Kale studied her in silence. By human standards, she was in her 30s, though hardship demonstrated itself in the lines at her eyes and the premature gray in her dark hair. Her hands were rough, scarred by labor. She smelled faintly of cleaning solvents, of exhaustion. "How old is your daughter?" he asked. "8, Your Majesty." "And what could an 8-year-old contribute to palace operations?" Rebecca lifted her head just enough to speak clearly, as if the steadiness of her words might build a bridge across the gulf between them. "She's small. She can clean places adults can't reach. She's quick. She learns fast. She won't complain. She won't cause trouble. Please." The desperation in her was fascinating. This woman had lost her world. His empire had destroyed it, and still she begged not for herself, but for one small child. He granted the request the same way he granted a minor budget allocation or a ceremonial pardon without feeling. But the reason was different. He wanted to observe. Riley arrived days later, thin and bright-eyed, moving like a shadow at her mother's side. She learned quickly how to keep her head down, how to step softly, how to vanish into the background. She never met a Solari's gaze. Humans had learned that direct eye contact could be taken as disrespect, even challenge. Yet Kale noticed patterns. Rebecca always placed herself between Riley and any Solari who entered a room. Her hand drifted to Riley's shoulder when footsteps approached. Riley glanced at her mother before acting, seeking silent permission, silent reassurance. It was constant vigilance, a posture of protection that never relaxed. Watching it was like watching someone hold a blade against their own throat every hour of every day. And yet Rebecca maintained it without fail. Tonight, Kale decided it was time for a proper experiment. He wanted to see what humans would do if they believed their emperor the all-powerful ruler, who had shattered their planet, was vulnerable. The palace was quiet. Most staff retired. Only essential personnel remained, including Rebecca and Riley, scheduled for evening chamber maintenance. Kale dismissed his guards, claiming he required privacy for meditation. He sealed the chamber doors. Then, alone on his resting platform, he began the process. Solari physiology was obedient. He slowed his breathing. He reduced his heart rate to near imperceptibility. He dimmed the shimmer of his skin until it looked dull and lifeless. He closed his eyes, yet beneath his outer lids, a transparent inner membrane remained clear, allowing him to see while appearing utterly unconscious to anyone else. He would look like a Solari in death sleep, the only sleep they ever experienced, and the only time they were truly defenseless. Kale became perfectly still and waited. The soft hiss of the chamber door opened. 2 sets of footsteps entered, one heavier, one lighter. Rebecca and Riley. The test began. Rebecca moved toward the environmental controls as she always did, her motions automatic. Then she stopped. Her hand froze midair. Her entire body went rigid. Kale watched with clinical interest as recognition hit her. Her breathing went shallow. Her pupils widened. The basket in her hand trembled. She knew what she was seeing. He expected panic. He expected her to flee, to call guards, to save herself. Instead, Rebecca took 3 swift steps and positioned herself between the platform and her daughter, arms stretched behind her like a shield. "Riley," she whispered, tight and trembling, "stay behind me. Don't move." Riley pressed into her mother's back without protest. Rebecca's mind raced. Kale could see it in the twitch of her fingers. The way her eyes measured the door, the distance, the angles. If the Emperor was dying, being here could mean execution. Leaving could also mean execution. There was no safe choice, yet her first instinct hadn't been self-preservation. It had been to block her child from danger. She moved with exaggerated caution, continuing her work with trembling hands. Then Riley slipped from behind her. Riley, no. Rebecca's whisper turned sharp with panic. Come back. Now. But Riley didn't return. She approached the resting platform with slow, deliberate steps. There was no fear in her posture, only curiosity, and something Kale couldn't name. She passed the platform and went to a wall alcove where Rebecca kept a few personal items. Riley reached in and pulled out a blanket, human-made, soft, worn, frayed edges, a comfort object, the kind of cloth human parents wrapped around their children. Riley unfolded it carefully, smoothing wrinkles with small hands. Then she approached Kale and draped it over his motionless form, tucking it around his shoulders with impossible gentleness. Her movements were practiced, tender, like she had done this for someone sick before. Kale's thoughts stalled. The blanket served no practical purpose. Solari bodies regulated temperature perfectly, yet Riley acted as if he might be cold. Then she sat on the floor beside the platform clothes, but not touching, her hand resting near his. Present without intrusion, Rebecca's voice cracked. Riley, baby, we have to leave. Now. No, Mama, Riley said, quiet but firm. He's sick. We can't leave. He's not sick, Rebecca whispered, voice breaking. She couldn't finish. Riley looked up at her. You told me nobody should be alone when they're sick. Her tone took on that stubborn certainty children wore like armor. Remember when I had that fever? You stayed with me all night, every night. The logic was simple and merciless. Someone vulnerable deserved company. Rebecca sank into a chair. Exhaustion and terror tangled together. We're going to die, she murmured, more to herself than to Riley. If anyone finds us here, we're going to die. Then we'll be quiet. Riley said. Time stretched. Guards approached the chamber door during their rounds. Kale heard them pause. Rebecca stood, body tight as wire, and intercepted them before they could enter. Through the walls, her voice came out steady, almost professional. The Emperor is meditating, she said. He ordered that he not be disturbed. The guards moved on when Rebecca returned. Her legs nearly buckled. She closed the door and leaned against it for a moment as if holding herself upright. Was the only resistance she had left. Riley remained beside Kale. After a while, she began humming a soft, repetitive melody, nearly inaudible. Kale recognized it from cultural databases, a lullaby, a song humans sang to ease fear, to offer comfort, to help a child sleep. Riley was singing to him, not because she was commanded, not because she sought reward, not because she believed it would save her. Simply because in her mind, that was what you did for someone who might be dying. In 3,000 years, Kale had heard anthems of conquest, hymns of surrender. War songs sung by species that had met death with defiance. No one had ever sung him a lullaby. Something shifted in his chest, something the Solari had not merely suppressed, but erased from their language, a concept humans still had a word for: compassion. Hours passed. Riley spoke softly into the darkness as if he were awake. Mama used to tell me about Earth, she murmured. About the ocean. She said the sky was really blue, not purple like here. Rebecca made a strange sound, a mix of grief and warning. Riley, please. But Riley kept going, voice filled with a sadness too old for her. Mama says, we had a house near the ocean. I don't remember it, but she says I used to chase the waves. Riley adjusted the blanket around Kale's shoulder with unconscious care. Do you think he's ever seen an ocean? Rebecca's voice came quiet and hollow. I don't know, baby, Riley considered. He's been alive for so long. He must have seen a lot of beautiful things. Kale had seen oceans, water, methane, worlds where seas shone like black glass under dying suns. He had watched nebulae flare, planets crack, civilizations blossom and vanish. And yet, as Riley spoke, he realized how alone he had been in all of it. Always alone, always above, always at a distance. Riley's voice softened. Mama says being alone is the hardest thing. Lonely hurts worse than being hungry. Rebecca's breath hitched, a sound that might have been a sob. Riley turned her head slightly toward her mother. Talking helps when people are sick. You talked to me all through the fever. You told me I wasn't alone. Rebecca fought exhaustion until she couldn't. Her head nodded, her eyes closed. After weeks of double shifts, of scraping together enough for her child, her body finally demanded what her fear couldn't prevent. Her hand remained extended toward Riley even as sleep took her, fingers loose but still reaching. Riley stayed awake longer, determined, stubborn, vigilant. Eventually she, too, curled beside the platform, small body folding into sleep, even unconscious. Her hand reached to catch the slipping blanket, pulling it back into place as if protecting him in dreams. Kale lay motionless, watching to humans sleep in the most dangerous room in the Empire, and his experiment collapsed into something else entirely. He had expected survival instincts, revenge, perhaps. Instead, he had witnessed a child choosing kindness without benefit, a mother allowing that kindness despite knowing it could kill them. What kind of species taught their young to care at such cost? Dawn finally painted the chamber in amber light. Kale decided it was time. He increased his heart rate. He let his skin regain its metallic shimmer. His breathing deepened, audible now, the breath of waking rather than dying. Rebecca snapped awake instantly, terror flooding her face. She stumbled from the chair and lunged for Riley, scooping the child into her arms. Kale opened his eyes and sat up. The blanket slid into his lap. Both humans froze. Rebecca dropped to her knees, clutching Riley tightly. Your Majesty, please, forgive us, punish me, but spare my daughter. She's just a child. She didn't understand. Riley pressed her face into her mother's shoulder, confused by the panic but absorbing it like heat. Kale raised one hand. Be silent. Silence fell so hard it felt physical. He looked at them, the woman and child kneeling on his floor, trembling, waiting to be destroyed by his judgment. And to his surprise, he found no satisfaction in their fear, only a hollow ache. His voice came out quieter than intended. "Why did you stay?" Rebecca started speaking, frantic. "I couldn't leave my daughter, and she wouldn't. I am asking the child." Kale's gaze fixed on Riley. "Why did you stay?" Riley lifted her face from her mother's shoulder. Her eyes were wet, but she looked at him directly, something she had never done before. "You looked lonely," she said. 3 words. They struck Kale like a blow. "Lonely," he repeated, tasting the word as if it were foreign matter. Emperors were not lonely. Gods were not lonely. Solari perfection did not allow for such needs. And yet the truth settled with unbearable clarity. He had been lonely for so long that he had forgotten what connection felt like. "What does your mother tell you to do about loneliness?" he asked, almost against his will. Riley sniffed, thinking. "She says that's why people need each other. Families, friends, so nobody has to be alone." Friends. Kale had advisors, generals, administrators. He had alliances forged by necessity and obedience bought by fear. He did not have friends. Riley tilted her head. "Do you have any?" Kale's answer came softly. "No, I do not." "That's sad," Riley said, and there was no cruelty in it, only sincere sympathy. Everybody should have at least one friend. Rebecca had gone pale, certain the Emperor would explode. But Kale felt no anger. He felt something tight and unfamiliar in his chest. "I was not truly dying," he told Riley. "I was pretending." Riley's mouth fell open. "Why would you pretend to be dying?" Kale looked at Rebecca and saw in her eyes the deeper fear, not of punishment, but of being treated as a thing to be examined. "I wanted to understand humans," Kale said. "I wanted to see what you would do if you believed your emperor was vulnerable." Rebecca's voice was a whisper. "What did you learn?" Kale looked down at the blanket in his lap. Cheap cloth, fraying edges, no value his empire could measure, and yet it held more meaning than 1,000 ceremonies. "I learned," he said slowly, "that I have ruled for 3,000 years without understanding what strength truly is." That morning, he dismissed them with orders that startled even himself. "Return tomorrow." He told Rebecca not to clean, to visit. Rebecca stared, uncertain if it was a trap, but she nodded, grasping Riley's hand tightly, and left. Kale remained alone, the blanket still on his platform. He lifted it, letting the soft fabric run between his fingers. A child had covered him because she believed he might be cold, because she believed he might be alone. Over the following days, Riley returned with her mother. Rebecca remained cautious, eyes always searching for danger, body always poised to snatch her daughter and flee. Kale did not threaten them. He asked Riley questions, simple, strange questions, as if he were studying a new element in the universe. What made humans happy? How did they decide who to trust? Why did they share food when they had little? Riley answered with blunt honesty. She spoke of games in settlement zones, of neighbors who looked after each other, of her mother singing to her every night. "Does anyone sing to you?" Riley asked one evening. No, Kale admitted. The Solari do not sing lullabies. Riley frowned as if he'd confessed to not knowing how to breathe. That's really sad. Everyone needs lullabies. They help you remember you're not alone in the dark. The Solari had optimized away bonding. Art without purpose, affection, softness. Those things were inefficient. But sitting with Riley, Kale began to see what had been lost. You could not form genuine connection without vulnerability, and vulnerability, he was beginning to understand, was not the same as weakness. To weeks. Later, Kale summoned his High Council. 23 of the most powerful Solari gathered in the Grand Council chamber, golden skin gleaming beneath cold lights. Generals, administrators, chief scientists, the architects of domination. They expected routine imperial business. Instead, Kale spoke words that bent the room around them. Effective immediately, he announced, all human settlement zones are to be dismantled. Humans will be integrated as full citizens of the Empire with complete rights and protections. Silence slammed down. Then outrage erupted. Madness. General Varen spat, rising so fast his chair toppled. Humans are inferior, weak, short-lived, emotionally unstable. They will dilute our strength. Kale raised a hand, and the voices died instantly. You speak of strength, he said calmly. Tell me, General, how many times has someone sat with you simply because they thought you might be lonely? Varen blinked, thrown. What? Answer. Never, Varen said, stiff. Such behavior would be inappropriate. Exactly. Kale swept his gaze over the council. I have ruled for 3,000 years. Not one of you has ever asked if I was well. Not one of you has offered care without calculating advantage. Admiral Chin spoke carefully. Your Majesty, you stand above such needs. Do I? Kale's eyes brightened, and discomfort rippled through the room. I encountered an 8-year-old human child. Kale continued. She believed I was dying. She could have fled. She could have done nothing. Instead, she covered me with a blanket and sat beside me, because she believed no one should suffer alone. A child's foolish sentiment, Varen muttered. Kale's voice sharpened. Is it foolish? We destroyed her world. By all rights, she should hate me. Yet when she saw what she believed was suffering, she responded with compassion. He stepped down from the platform, moving among them. We built our empire on the belief that power means standing alone at the apex. We optimized away emotion and connection, calling them weaknesses. He stopped, meeting their eyes one by one. But true strength is not the absence of vulnerability. True strength is the courage to care even when it costs you, even when it brings no advantage. Administrator Wells tried to sound rational. You would restructure the entire empire because of one human child. Yes, Kale said simply. Because she demonstrated what it means to be alive, not merely to exist. No one challenged him. No one dared. The transformation that followed was not smooth. Solari resisted. Humans mistrusted the sudden shift, fearing it was a trap. Protests flared, systems strained. Yet slowly, something remarkable began to take root. Humans taught Solari how to celebrate, how to grieve together, how to form bonds not based on utility, but affection. Solari shared technology, resources, medicine, stability, in places that had once been cages. Neighborhoods formed. In spaces built for separation, communities appeared. Kale walked through former settlement zones, now integration districts, and saw Solari children playing with human children. Laughter bouncing off walls that had once heard only silence. He saw mixed teams working as equals. He saw something his empire had never truly possessed: belonging. One evening, he sat in the palace gardens watching a twin sun sunset spill gold across stone paths. Riley, older, now nearly 9, approached without ceremony and climbed onto the bench beside him. Once, that casualness would have been unthinkable. Now it felt right. "Do you still feel lonely?" she asked, swinging her legs that didn't reach the ground. Kale considered. "Less than I did. But sometimes, yes. 3,000 years doesn't disappear in a few months." Riley nodded solemnly, as if she understood time differently than most children. "Mama says healing takes time. You have to be patient with yourself." "Your mother is wise," Kale said. "I know," Riley replied with simple pride. Then she reached over and took his hand in hers. No speech, no request, no agenda, just presence. Kale felt the weight of it the way it could not be commanded, bought, or conquered. It could only be given freely. "Thank you," he said quietly. Riley blinked. "For what?" "For teaching me what it means to be awake." She frowned. "But you were already awake. You were just pretending to sleep." Kale's smile came easier now than it ever had in 3 millennia. "I was awake," he agreed. "But I wasn't really living. There's a difference." They sat together in comfortable silence as the sun slipped behind the horizon. Long shadows stretching across a palace that had once embodied isolation and was, slowly, becoming something else. Not a perfect empire. Something better. A civilization. Learning, at last, how to hold each other in the dark.